Hello. I see
Morning,
John
Laura.
and John, Renata's phone, and Carrie so far. That's good. How are you all doing? That's good. All right. So this seems to be working. And then I think the recording starts automatically. Okay, great. Well, we're 5 minutes early. So how are you all doing? Are there any questions you have in mind that I can start off with?
I have an oblique question. That is,
Oh,
I
sure.
haven't read The Handmaid's Tale,
Yes.
and I hesitate to watch the one on television before
One,
reading the book. Have you done both?
the one on television, only part of the first season has to do with the book. All the future seasons are new, pretty much new story and further development of the characters. So what I'd recommend is reading the book, which is a pretty quick read, and then maybe reading her sequel, which came out 30 years later, 40 years later. That's called The Testaments. Then if you want to see the TV show, that's a whole separate thing. So, yeah. And it's definitely a project that she, as an author, was skeptical about and was sort of done with once she gave permission to have them adapt it as an opera. She wasn't involved in the adapting of it as an opera or the kind of knowing that it would be done in Danish and then having there be an English version that would get performed more. She just sort of signed off and accepted a fee. And the person that thought of the whole project really was the one that adapted it for the opera. So then the television show is a different thing because they did want her to appear a couple of times with the actresses, and if it won a prize, show up and be applauded and that kind of thing. But again, she wasn't involved in adapting it into a TV show, and she definitely was not involved in all the meetings that go on to develop it into a further longer-term project. So I've actually never seen the TV show because I wanted to wait till they were done making it and then sort of watch all of it and see their very different worldview of it. But yeah.
I recently watched a video about the ongoing controversy of using genetic engineering for designer babies,
Oh, okay.
and she was one of the major interviewees.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's a
Uh,
topic she's interested in.
yeah, right.
So you're talking about Margaret Atwood being interested in that kind of scientific topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, they when they got married, they moved to a farm in Ontario. That's where they raised their kids. So
Hmm.
the world that she describes as the end of the Underground Railroad, or the end of where you get to safety. That's where she went after she wrote the book. So. Did you get a chance, John, to listen to any of the world premiere performance?
Yes.
Yeah, and I had a few people following along with different parts of the score as they did that. So,
Yeah. The challenge, of course, is it was in Danish.
yeah, but that's the only recording.
I know. And there are no subtitles.
That's right, because it was in Danish for Danish people, composed by a Dane.
Right.
Yep, that's why I sent you the score, so you can see
Yeah.
both if you want. So,
Yeah. Once you sent those pages, it made a huge difference
yeah.
because they left out certain sections and it was really hard to find your place once you lost your place.
Yeah, so Judy was in the middle of watching Act One and asked me if I would make a special list for the scenes in Act One how do the page numbers go with the world premiere recording unless you lost your place. So I'm going to send that to everybody else. But yeah, that I had never done that, and I think that took me an hour and 10 minutes to do that.
That's what I was afraid of. I
It took me longer
know.
to do it than it would have to just watch it. But yeah, so now I have a little guide that matches the only recording of Handmaid's Tale to the only piano vocal score of it.
Right. And Act Two went fine. There were no differences between the
Yeah, that's
score.
because as they've continued to perform it, they haven't made any cuts or changes to Act Two.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great. Okay, so people are logging in. It's nice to see everyone. Let me just go through and mute a few people. Once I'm sharing my screen, that's not really possible for me to mute people. I have to go in and out of sharing my screen to do it, just so you know. Yeah, so hi, this is Laura Pritchard again, and we are now to the third of 5 classes for Brandeis Ollie's new Masterworks series. And in our first class, I concentrated on Aaron Zigman's music, especially his new oratorio that began as an opera, Émigré. And then in the last class, I did sort of 3 shorter presentations on 3 very contrasting works. One, a Puccini-style opera that had its American premiere in San Francisco that I worked on, that we called Two Women, but is called La Ciociara everywhere else. And then did a short presentation on the chamber music version of James Whitbourn's authorized use of text from Anne Frank's diary called Annalies. And I played you a couple of excerpts from that. And I have since then found a score that you can look up for free online, and you can download your own copy of the chamber music version. But to answer a couple questions that I received, I do not know of a way to look at the full orchestral score without contacting his publisher and paying the $2,500 performance fee to do that. That's not a score. The full score version is not a score that's for sale of that oratorio, as far as I know. And I have never found a video or audio recording of the fully orchestrated version of that. Every version I have heard or been involved with has been the chamber music version of that Whitbourn score. So I sent you a couple of links to that to listen to. And then we also talked a bit about Paul Reuter's newish opera, the only authorized treatment of Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale that's been made into a concert or stage work. So just wanted to begin, so I got a lot of feedback from people. Thank you for filling out those midterm feedback reports. And one thing that I wanted to do was go around and just ask each person to introduce yourself briefly. If we were an in-person class, that would have been easy to do on the first day. And then to see if you had any comments or questions related to the works we've done so far. And then I want to, at the kind of the latter part of the class, to go on and talk about a female composer, Rhiannon Giddens, who has made most of her career as a traditional musician, banjo, bluegrass, fiddle, and singing, but she has some classical training, and she wrote an opera that I was involved with. Now it's been 3 and 4 years ago. Talk to you a little bit about that, and then for next week, get you listening to her music. Then in the following class, I'm going to concentrate on Mason Bates, an American composer who started to write a lot of choral music, some oratorio, some opera, and then we'll end up with a long list at the end of the class of many, many other pieces that may interest you in the future. So let me go around the class list that I have and ask people to introduce themselves. And if you have any particular questions, let me have time to address those. or if you just have comments about what you've heard so far and what you're interested in. Let me start with John first, who is sort of my mentor in this process of teaching. And John's going to be teaching his own class coming up pretty soon. So John, could you introduce yourself? And we were already talking as people logged on a little bit about how A Handmaid's Tale, the novel, would be a great thing to read as a companion to the operatic adaptation, but the TV show starts at the beginning of the book Handmaid's Tale and goes off in different directions. So John, if I wondered if you'd introduce yourself and let us know your comments so far.
Sure. My name's John Godin. I've been a member of BOLLI for about 2 years now. The vast majority of the courses I've taken have been in music. I'm not a musician. Just wish I were. I've found this particular course incredibly fascinating because I knew nothing about this music. I didn't even know it existed. And it's remarkably interesting. I greatly appreciate it.
And you're a retired doctor with a background in physics, that's right?
Yeah, I originally started in physics. While getting my PhD, I decided to change to medicine, went to medical school, and just recently retired.
My father-in-law began in philosophy as a lifelong opera addict, but also went to medical school and has just retired as a neurologist. So I find that it's very common if you ask your doctor, what was your first major, you get a really interesting background. They're almost all musicians or almost musicians. So you had asked me a question about Handmaid's Tale. I didn't know if you had comments about any of the other 4 things we'd listened to or questions that had arisen as you were listening.
No, I liked all of them. I listened to what was available on Annalies and thought that was beautiful. That's obviously a story that's well known and very dear to most Jews. So I didn't know it had been made into an oratorio, but I thought it was wonderful and very sparse, which was appropriate.
So I just put in the chat, and I will also send it to everyone as a related material. We were able to find the score online for anyone would like to see the chamber music version of that score. If you click on that, that takes you to a program that will allow you to see and turn the pages, sort of as if it's a paper score. And the composer put us on to that. He said that's available for free, and the full orchestral version is available if you pay the full performance rights to rent it. And then he sends you all the orchestral parts and that kind of thing. And that's becoming more of a standard for contemporary oratorios to reserve the right to publish the music through a custodian sort of publisher. And then, and this is true of all Broadway shows, you contact Music Theater International, a typical publisher, and then you ask them if their work is available to be performed on a certain date. And if no one near you is performing it, you pay performing rights, and they mail you complete scores and a set of orchestral parts. And then you have until about 4 days after your official performance to return the scores. And the performance fee for new oratorios, new operas, and musicals is based on how many seats there are in the house you're going to present it in and how much you plan to charge per seat. So for example, when I do musical theater with children in the Winchester, Massachusetts area outside of Boston, we perform 3 shows a year, fully staged, 4 shows in a medium-sized auditorium, and the performing rights for something like that are between $2,000 and $4,000 just for the rights to get the materials for the children to do the performance. So Annalies, you can rent the full orchestral material, but it is, it's I think $2,500 to schedule a single performance of that. if you're performing it in a church or something like that. John, you have a question?
Not a question. It's actually already in the chat from somebody else. But could everybody mute because you're getting echoes of Laura's voice through some of your speakers?
Yeah, so when people log in and out, it might happen that they are not muted, and there are a couple of different ways to do that. You can go to the bottom of your screen and click on the audio and choose to mute yourself. And then anytime I'm not sharing my screen, I can also double check that. Yeah, so that was a good question. And I put the score to Annalies, the chamber music version, in the chat. Let's see. What about Linnea Olson? Did you have any questions for us? Let's see, you have to unmute. I think you have to click to unmute.
I don't really have questions right now. I've been involved with BOLLI for, I don't know, 8 or 10 years. And in the course of that, I've taken a few of Phil Radoff's classes. And I've also been going to the Met Live performances frequently in the area. And that's how I'm trying to educate myself about opera. But it's really delightful to have these more contemporary works. And I'm really happy to have that opportunity.
What have been your favorites when you've gone to the Met Live performances? Are there some lately that are very memorable to you, or that kind of music that you prefer?
Well, I like some of the classics like La Boheme or Tosca, but I've also enjoyed, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was about the person who was on death row and the nun who was working with him.
So that is, let me just write it in the chat. That's called Dead Man Walking.
Right.
By Jake Heggie.
Right.
And I have a long time ago when that was a new opera. It's just been revived at San Francisco during this last season. But when it was new, I was one of the editor helpers on it. So I've got a copy of that piano vocal score as well. So I can make that available to the class as well. That's been recorded and performed a lot. So that score might be useful to people. Jake Heggie,
and then the other one is The Hours.
Oh, The Hours. You like, okay.
Yeah, which was fabulous.
Cool. That one, that's one of the ones that the score is reserved for performance rental only. That's one that, let's see, I believe that one's by Kevin Putz, and it would have been 2022 that came out. Let me just put his name in the chat. Kevin Putz, 2022. He's a New York-based composer, and he's worked a lot with the librettist who was also the main librettist for Émigré, and who is the librettist for the current Cavalier and Clay opera that just sold out all of its performances at the Met. One of the reasons I'm trying to push the composer of that opera later in the class is that they did record it, and at some point they'll be allowing people to stream it. So maybe if we talk about it in the last class, we'll be able to stream The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, done at the Met recently. It's definitely not one that they had the money together in advance to know that they could fully film it. It costs about $125,000 for the Met to create one of those fully filmed live for camera events. And they have a staff of about 25 people required to make that happen. So they have to identify the operas that will be picked for that. I think it's about 24 months in advance. And then the people filming those operas for Met Live work closely with the director to figure out all the staging and the angles. And for those operas, there's a lot less freedom in the staging for that reason. You have to really hit your mark because the cameras are set up, to film all the lights in a certain way. So that's also the reason I think that many of these newer works aren't as well known because, for example, one of the ones I'll talk about today called Omar, it had little bits of it recorded as part of the publicity for the 4 first performances of it, but it didn't have an additional, it would have been kind of like a triple commission. About $200,000 for the makers of the opera, about $200,000 for the production of the opera, and then it would have been a third $200,000 to make a full film of it. So that hasn't been done yet in that case for Rhiannon and Giddens' piece. But yeah, it's exciting that we're starting to see it. For me, watching the Met Live operas and things like that that are so minutely choreographed in the filming, it's a lot like watching a huge stadium sports event where they zoom in and you see every drop of sweat on the sports character, and that's kind of the performer's view, and I don't think that's the way operas are really meant to be seen and experienced. You know, you're meant to be back in the hall and have everything presented to you and the waves of sound wash over you. So for me, it's an interesting experiment, but it's really, really different than being in the hall live, or where I usually am, you know, backstage waiting to go on, really, really hot and too big of a costume or something like that. So that's great. That's interesting, Linnea. Judy, I wanted to ask you if you would say a few things. I know you had a personal connection to one of the things we'd watched so far.
Sure. I've been a BOLLI member for 2 years and have taken courses really all over the place, including some music courses. My son, my youngest son, was trained as an opera singer. He's not, unfortunately, working as an opera singer at this point, but he is sort of my connection to opera and the way I find things out. And one of his friends was actually in the San Francisco premiere of La Ciociara. What I really enjoy about this course is how different the selections are musically. I find it fascinating that some 21st century compositions are so tonal and so sort of musically somewhat conservative, and other ones, like The Handmaid's Tale, are very edgy and way out there. And then I'm sure we're going to hear some more of many different styles. And I was lucky enough to see the performance in Boston of Handmaid's Tale, and it was spectacular. And I was hoping that it had been filmed at some point, but unfortunately, I think
Parts of it, just little excerpts of it, were filmed for publicity purposes, but that was the year that they were creating sort of a video opera television series that was a separate piece, so they kind of put all their media money into that. What were your reactions to the live version you saw of Handmaid's Tale? Because as you said, when you're just kind of listening to it, especially when you hear the orchestra play a scale or even a chromatic cluster and they build up a cluster of sound, it's very overwhelming if you don't have a visual aspect to connect with it. So I wondered if you'd talk about your impression.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I know there were a lot of people and a lot of time, but it was an amazing staging right on the basketball court. There was a full orchestra to the right of it, and they had a lot of use of projection, so that the heads of people on the wall were a projection against the gym wall, and it was very effective. It was very realistic. And the music was very much geared toward the action that was going on the stage. And it felt like the participants who were sitting on bleachers were actually a part of the performance. So it was an amazing experience. The music is very hard to get a hold of, though. It's very edgy music.
And if people want to continue to explore that work, I will send out in my notes from class a little guide that I made for Act 1, if you want to try to keep the score open while you're listening to the YouTube links, because I think that it's a form of surtitles for it. But there are a couple of places in Act 1 where the score adds an aria that's not in the or trim something that's different from the world premiere recording. So I'll send that link out, the email out that I wrote for you that has the page numbers. That's great. Okay, so we've heard a couple of comments about La Ciociara being tonal. And I heard one person in their early comments saying, an old masterwork, an old favorite La Boheme. And I smiled a little bit when you said that, because in the world of opera, and when you're training to sing opera, you study opera as something that begins very, very simply and intimately in the 1600s and has almost no large group things and almost no choruses other than the leading characters coming out and singing together. And then by the 1700, it starts to get bigger and bigger, and you have kind of standard works that are still done today. I think the oldest one that I've seen done very often is Monteverdi's very last opera from the end of his life, from the 1640s, called The Coronation of Poppaea. And that's done mainly by new music orchestras in a partly staged format, because the original operas had almost no sets and almost no staging, and the singers wore their own costumes. But then when you think of sort of older classic operas, you think of 1780s to 1880s, Mozart up into Verdi. And then for me as a singer, learning to sing Puccini is really hard. Learning to sing Puccini is very post-Wagnerian. There are tunes that the orchestra and the singers present to the audience that I think to the audience sound easy to sing, but on the page it's very, very difficult. It's very much more modern looking. So what I've been trying to present to you are composers who might not so far have thought of themselves as classical composers, or might not have thought of themselves at least as modernists or composers for the classical concert hall, who have been asked to write operas. And some of them have really dived into it and are now interested in writing a lot of concert works, or combining their first love, their first kind of music, with classical music. So the next two people I'll be concentrating on are that. Let me just write the names again in the chat. The first is Mason Bates, who started out as a DJ in clubs, literally spinning records and scratching them and choosing records and taking clips of things and copying bits of the sound into his computer, and then moving the bits of sound around and using his computer to compose. And in that sense, he uses as a model the the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, Berkeley-based composer John Adams. John Adams has been writing large-scale oratorios and operatic works since the 1980s, and he is one of the first composers to compose using the computer sort of as his instrument. He'll play in a very small amount, he'll cut and paste it, and he'll overlap it in that way. So he is interested in a minimalist style because it's very easy for him, John Adams, to take a tiny bit of a melody and then copy it and then say paste 128 times. And so then the violin goes da 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 da, but the live musicians have to actually sing that. And Boston Symphony is going to be presenting several of John Adams' minimalist works with chorus and full orchestra in January. Mason Bates, who I'll be coming to, starts out as a DJ and is really interested in electronic sounds. And so he combines very tonal sounding music and some kind of simple operatic and classical forms with electronic sounds underneath it. And I sent everybody an email already today that said a few of his pieces you can listen to going forward. That's a combination of kind of house music and electronic music with a more tonal approach to setting voices. Yeah, that's great. Okay, those were the main people that I had heard from in advance that said they had comments or questions. Are there other people right now so far that have comments or questions about the Zigman piece, Émigré, or the Italian opera, La Ciociara? Cynthia Rosenberg, you raised your hand.
I just wanted to make a comment about how different this class is to any other music class I've taken in Bali, and that is that I never knew what a dramaturge does, and that's been very interesting. And you're sharing with us the economics of how things are created and staged and who does what job. I think that's really interesting, and I never knew anything about that. And then I would echo what John said about this music that I have not heard, even though I love going to the opera and I've heard and seen a lot of opera. So I just wanted to add that to it, that that's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, and when I was trying to make a few picks for this class, John was helping me sort of choose what to talk about. Obviously, if we wanted to get into a lot of detail, we would just sort of pick one composer and a lot of their new works. But as a new teacher here at BOLLI, that seemed a little risky. Just the topic in general, like sign up and listen to things, and will anybody want to hear it, because they'll think everything is going to be so dissonant. We tried to pick a couple of composers that we thought people had heard of, and then a couple of composers that we thought people would really like right away upon hearing them. But it would be interesting in the future to offer it again and look at 4 or 5 more different composers. I think if I did that again, it might be like a year from the spring, and then that would give me a chance to hone the list so it would be more local people. So you would be able to combine it with actual local performances and things like that. I think that could be a lot of fun. The thing for me that's frustrating is that I've seen all of these live, and I've seen them live sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 years ago. So then when I'm talking about them, I feel like I'm talking a little bit in the past tense about works that nobody can possibly see. They're sort of in a bubble. But the nice thing is that there are agents of these composers that are willing to get out of their comfort zone and approach opera companies about staging things. And for example, Aaron Zigman's oratorio has been done in Berlin, which is where some of the characters originate from in that story. It's been done, it was done first in Shanghai, it's been done in New York, it's been done in London, and then it'll be done in Vienna this fall. So they're kind of slowly making progress. Annalies is going to be sung locally in the winter, so I will send you all the link to that if you want to go and hear a live version of that. So yeah, that would be great. Hopefully I'm whetting your appetite, and it's nice that we can watch some of this stuff through the computer, but the idea is to get you to go and take a chance on Boston Lyric Opera when they present something new. And they're really great about approaching a composer who they've listened to a lot and they know will be tonal enough, in the case of The Handmaid's Tale, that it will appeal to a local audience. So yeah. Okay, well, let me come back again at the end and ask again if there are comments and questions. And I wanted to then move on a little bit, because we have heard many examples of new works, some about women, but we have not heard any music by women. And that's one of my specialties. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a composer who I find very interesting because she has crossed over from folk and traditional music, gone through acting in a TV show where she portrayed a singer of gospel and country music, and then has started to receive classical commissions. And her name is Rhiannon Giddens. And so I want to talk about one particular work of hers that I had a little bit to do with the first 4 performances of. And then I have sent you some things to listen to of her diverse music, including her whole composer's website. And so we can discuss her music in a little more detail next time. So she received a commission to write an opera, and she chose as a topic a real diary that was written in Arabic by a man who had been a slave in North Carolina and South Carolina, very near the area where she grew up. So this is an image that has as its background an engraving of how slaves were packed into a slave ship. And standing in front of it is a little bit of handwriting from West Africa. And standing in front of that, wearing that handwriting, is the leading title character, Omar, who's based on a real person who was educated and wrote in Arabic. And when he finally got a chance to write, wrote sort of a life story and a personal diary, and some of that was translated into English, and the Library of Congress holds it. So that's what she used as the basis to develop the story. And it was first performed in the Spoleto Festival in the South, and then at LA Opera later that year. And there are many clips of it online from LA Opera and several interviews with the creators of this. Then Boston Lyric Opera staged it in 2023, and I was the rehearsal pianist for that. And then San Francisco Opera staged it in November 2023. And I was the kind of dramaturge that helped them get it up. And they did not change the visual element of the production much during this, so we've got a lot of great pictures. This is basically what the opera looks like. If the characters are in Africa thinking or singing in Arabic, then you see Arabic on their clothes, printed on the costumes, and you see it floating in the background, sort of like floating surtitles. As the characters become Americanized, in the case of Omar, as he learns English and starts to write in English, then he appears wearing his own words. And as I mentioned, it was based on a real person, Omar ibn Said, born in 1770 and died in 1864 in the United States during the time of the American Civil War. Here's an example of the reduced piano vocal score that I helped with to create in the first place. The orchestral arrangements are by a composer named Michael Abels, and the tunes and the idea and the construction of the whole piece and most of the libretto is by the female composer, American composer Rhiannon Giddens. So one of the things she does is she, as a performer, as a banjo player, she's been a leading member of a group called the Carolina Chocolate Drops, which is an award-winning kind of roots bluegrass type band. And for that, she revived a lot of old music, some from transcriptions that she had made herself, studying African-American fiddle style and African-American banjo style as a young person in the Carolinas. So for example, this is a tune that looks like it starts with a kind of a D minor scale, and it's based on this tune called Coromanti, which is an African tune that first was written down by a priest in the Caribbean in 1707. And she picked it because one of the oldest fully transcribed tunes that has a couple of different sections to it. So you have a two-measure phrase, for example, descending scale, and then kind of so, do, do, so, do, 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 that kind of sound. And then she develops that into a longer theme from those two measures. And I wanted to let you hear a little bit of that in the orchestration by Michael Abels as an example of a female folk and roots composer with classical training, creating an overture, developing it in the same way that Beethoven would from a very small idea. So let me just make sure we start this, and I'll go back and let you see the screen as it is going by. Okay. Okay, so let me just stop sharing for seconds. Questions or comments about that so far? Or any opinions that you have about it? Let me say a couple of things about it, just as far as like the construction of it. So this is music by Rhiannon Giddens. And she is combining, I'm just writing in the chat a little bit, she's combining 4 different tunes. One is that descending scale, and in D minor. And so for her, that represents the main character of the journey of the main character. Then you hear a bass line, especially in the middle section, that goes sort of 1, flat 3, 4, 5. So you hear kind of like 1, bum, bum, bum. And then I'm just typing in the chat. And then the third thing you hear is interruptions of meter. Especially you hear a lot of music in 4/4, and that's kind of the basic feeling of that overture. And let's see if I can get it to send. Yeah. Her idea of meter in this is that the sort of 4/4 pattern that the thing is constrained to, and the keeping it mostly in D minor for most of the time, is sort of a frame, a cage around the main character that they can't escape from. They have that real African tune, that ba 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 bum 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 bum, but it doesn't break into pieces and develop, and it doesn't move into different keys, and it doesn't sort of have the freedom that a theme would have in a Beethoven symphony, for example, to be passed all around the orchestra and transform into different harmonic areas and develop and slow down and speed up, because the character is captured, the character is constrained. But then as the overture goes on, that kind of driving 4/4 rhythm gets interrupted by little 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3, and the little 1 2 3s are the memory of Africa, the memory of dance, the memory of freedom, interrupting that sort of narrative flow of the 4/4 meter. The 1 3 4 5 over and over. She has that appear in the opera when a character is being told to calm down, or a character is being re-educated, or a character is being taught a new procedure. So sort of a very simple, almost European, or a very slow blues kind of foundation, moving along, and again, not developing and not modulating, to be like, here is your simple path that you must stay on. And we know that the person that the main character is based on does talk about the process of slowly learning English, and one of the things being most upsetting on the middle passage across was that once it was clear that they were all captured, even among themselves, they could not communicate, because there were so many different languages of people, and people would cry out for help, and you couldn't speak the language of the person next to you who was a captive, unless you had been educated and you had training in Arabic. The people that spoke Arabic were able to organize and able to speak to a kind of a broader group. Jean, you put your hand up. Can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yes, I did. So I think I was considering a few things, and one is the name Omar. So I associate that with the Arabic, the Middle East. And yet this is a tune transcribed in 1707 in the Caribbean. So I'm trying to make sense of these two locations in the world coming together. It seems like a very lively and repetitive opening, and then eventually it seems like it was a cello or a bass comes in.
Yeah, so
But-
the reason this particular tune was picked is it is the oldest fully transcribed tune that exists. There probably were little examples of things people were able to hear in the 1600s, but as far as something that someone fully transcribed and it's preserved to us, this is the oldest one that's reported to be an African tune heard in the New World. The way that the movement of people and traded them for goods worked, New Orleans was a major port. Several places in the Caribbean were first stop ports that people would be unloaded, then sort of resorted and reshuffled before they were brought north. But the largest port along the eastern seaboard and the longest open port, as far as one that accepted humans trafficked from West Africa, was Charleston, South Carolina. And that's where this person that the opera was brought in to the country for the first time. They were brought into South Carolina, sold a second time, and made their way to a smaller farm that was run by someone who is Methodist, and in their own religious practice used writing and singing and reading as a connection to the spiritual, and found out that this person, Omar, enslaved person, also could read and sang and use the same written and sung and musical processes to contact the divine and the spiritual. And it's too strong to call it a friendship. He didn't free him. And the main character died during the Civil War. He was still an enslaved person, but was given paper and was given ink and was encouraged to write and was encouraged to read English. And the diary was preserved. It wasn't like a secret diary kept on the side. He knew that what he was writing was going to be read by the owner, so that definitely, he was smart, and he definitely modulated what he wrote down that was going to be read, knowing that that was going to happen. But there are a few tunes in it from the Caribbean. Those are the oldest examples of music. And then there are tunes that the composer herself learned from her fiddle teacher, who was one of the last teachers of sort of conveying African-American folk fiddle heritage from a period that he learned from his teachers who had been enslaved, conveying it to her. And she grew up in an arts high school in North Carolina and had no idea about all this local history originally. So that was something that really stunned her and that she wanted to explore further. Let me go on and show you some more examples of the work. So that's the slide that we were on. I sort of showed you the printed main tune. All right, a little bit behind the story in her own words.
My name is Rhiannon Giddens, and I am the librettist and co-composer for the opera Omar. It is a journey through Omar ibn Said's life and internal struggle. His story is really, really necessary addition to broadening the idea of what an American story is. He was a Senegalese Quranic scholar who was stolen from his homeland and sold into slavery, and he ended up in Charleston first, and then he ran away from the man who bought him there and ended up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he ended up living out the rest of his days as an enslaved man. But he wrote his autobiography in Arabic. You know, it's the only document of that kind we have in the United States, and it's really important, not only because it's a story from an enslaved person's own pen and point of view, even though we know that there's a lot of layers over that, because as he knows, people are, he is in somebody else's power while he's writing that, so we always have to consider that, but also that he was Muslim, and that's a whole chapter of American history that is not really talked about, the 1/4 to 1/3 of enslaved people who were Muslim who were brought to the United States. And of course with the backdrop of the Middle Passage and the auction block and all of these things, but this is the reality for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people, is that they had to live their lives under the most unbelievable duress, So the opera is attempting to have, not really pull the punches of what he was going through, but when you get to the end, what you remember is not the Middle Passage, is not the bad master, is his triumph in figuring out how to maintain connected to his God. There's a million different ways to tell Omar's story, and I hope that happens. I hope this is not the last, that we hear of Omar bin Said. I mean, he deserves as many treatments as a lot of other, American stories. We don't need, there's a lot of people we don't need more stories about. We could do with a few more Omar stories, and I chose a way through it that made sense to me as a American North Carolinian banjo player of mixed race, and I'm very, very clear about that. But in my own way, I really tried to make his words speak as much as possible. There's a triumph in Omar, and that's the important piece of digging into this history, particularly for people of the African diaspora, African Americans, people who are descended from these stories. And I want people to feel that, I want them to walk out going, we're all of us carrying pain. We're all of us carrying trauma. And I understand the trauma that I'm carrying a little bit better because I've seen how this character overcame his.
Okay, let me say just a few words about the real person it was based on. And you have his dates there. These are dates in his life, places that he actually was. So he's born in Furutoro. He goes to Mecca when he is 20 on a pilgrimage. Then he studies at the sort of college and graduate level, mostly religious literature. Then he's brought to South Carolina. He's brought in through Charleston in 1807. And in that year, 1807, 40% of enslaved people were being brought in through the port of Charleston. This is the same location that later, about 120 years later, George Gershwin would travel down to Charleston, South Carolina to do research on local dialects and local tunes that he could find left in Charleston, South Carolina from this same history and heritage. And there are still people and musical rangers in state parks, especially along the Georgia Sea Islands, that are singing in mixed languages, English mixed with African languages, and Gullah and Geechee singing and musical dance and vocal traditions that survive. So I'll also be including on the links that relate to this more excerpts of this for you to listen to. It was never fully filmed yet, and links to other kinds of traditional folk music from along the southern Eastern Seaboard, so you can listen to a lot of these mixes and survivals. As she mentioned, he was in South Carolina for 2.5 years. He ran away, but then was recaptured and lived from 1810 to 1864 in North Carolina. In 1821, he converted to Methodism and began to learn to speak English, and at that point was given paper and ink and started to write his own diary and autobiography in Arabic. And part of what survives is his own handwriting in English, and part of it is the owner's handwriting in English, translating as he learned to speak English. So in the opera, you see him wearing, you see the bad slave master stereotype character in South Carolina wearing fabric that has printed on it rules relating to selling people and slavery. On his coat is printed that kind of information. And then as Omar learns English and becomes somewhat integrated into North Carolina local culture and converts to Methodism, then you see the writing that on the wall behind him and the writing on costumes around him showing the languages that he's starting to understand. 1831 is when he finished the collection of pages that are now called his autobiography that are in the Library of Congress. The main question I had about this when I was helping with research for it is, what do you mean all these people spoke Arabic, and what do you mean, roughly a third of people were Muslim that came over? And so I just want to give you a couple dates that you might not be as familiar with. we as people of European descent are often told that the birth of the university is in Bologna, Italy, in the 13th century, but there was higher education in Northern Africa before that. The 3rd century BC in Egypt, especially in the Library of Alexandria, but in 4 other large collections. There were over 200,000 volumes, and by that I mean mainly scrolls, not books-shaped codex, that could be consulted. And just in the 3rd century alone, in the Library of Alexandria, we know of thousands of scholars who visited, even though the library later burned. Readers of many different languages, Egyptian languages, different African languages, Greek, Roman, Jewish readers, and the language of Arabic hadn't been invented yet at that point. In the 3rd century AD, early Christian monasteries start to collect books, sometimes to keep them away from the general public in a private setting, and sometimes to preserve important copies. In the 3rd century AD in Egypt, in the same time, and in the 4th century AD in Ethiopia, there start to be schools of hymn singing and writing, of poetry writing and recitation, and a kind of school in Egypt and Ethiopia called the Metzaheft, a school of studying holy books. And in Ethiopia, these tended to be more Christian in their collections, and in Egypt, very quickly they evolved to include writing in Arabic. Then, long before, 500, 600 years before Europe, there were also universities at Islamic mosques. And these are just 4 of them, the 4 oldest one that still exists today. You can still study there. The Eight Zitouna Madrasa in Tunis, the Mosque University in Fez, Morocco, the Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo is a part of Cairo University now, and the University of Sankore in Timbuktu in Mali. And they taught the old classical quadrivium that some of us, you, but definitely me at Yale, studied as the sort of foundation of the important parts of a classical education. So logic, astronomy, astrology, music along with astronomy, music along with theology, and then reading and writing, basically grammar, rhetoric. They taught history, they taught geography. This was the kind of education Omar had. Here's an example of 2 contrasting costumes from the production. On the right, you can see the sort of stereotyped bad master of slaves from the landing in South Carolina scene, and he's actually wearing a list of names of people who were sold with the amount that they were sold for in his outer top coat. And then she created a character named Julie to sort of interpret for us what's going on and be sort of an angelic, hope-like figure, a little bit like a leader of the Greek chorus. And Julie starts out wearing 4 different languages, and her dresses evolve to be more and more English as people get off the boats and become more integrated into American groups. I also just wanted to say a last thing. When you're writing a piece of music that's going to have words, you don't have to anymore put it in the language of the locals. In the case of A Handmaid's Tale, the Danish composer with his Danish commission felt very strongly that there should be a Danish language version of the story, but as he was composing it, he also put in the English language version that is now much more often done. In this case, she wanted to include languages for the chorus when they are in the scene showing the middle passages that reflect different languages that were spoken in the bowels of those boats of the different people who were brought across. So Wolof is one of the languages that Omar sings in. And then these are the 4 other national languages spoke commonly in Senegal at the time. So there are a few words in each of those languages. Most of the people on the particular boat he was on were from Senegal. And then he was trained in Arabic as a literary written language, the way that someone in Europe 1,000 years ago would speak their local language but be trained to read and write in Latin. or in Beethoven's time would be trained to read and write in French, the language of diplomacy in the 1700s. Mandingo was also very commonly spoken, and that was learned, and there are hybrid versions of it: Mandingo in Portuguese, Mandingo in Dutch, Mandingo in British English, Mandingo in French, that survive in the New World, and some of that survives on the islands off the coast of the eastern seaboard even today. French was the official colonial language of Senegal, but that's really from a period after he had already left Africa and he never went back to Africa. So we know that he didn't know any French or speak any French or report anything about hearing French. 15% of people in Senegal have it as their first language still today. So let me let you hear the composer talk a little bit more about the musical sources, and that will go specifically to the question I've been asked already about why that Caribbean tune. And this is the Boston Lyric Opera Chorus learning one of the choral pieces, and she is sort of coaching them on the correct way to get the jaunty rhythm right. I'm playing the piano in the background. I think you can see my hands a few times. And then seated with the score is the person that's called head of music, who sometimes plays piano and prepares the score. And then the person who conducted the Boston Lyric Opera performance is running the rehearsal. So you can see Rhiannon Giddens sitting and singing to the chorus. You can hear me playing, and this is the chorus preparing one of the selections. So this is about a year and a half old from rehearsal in Boston.
Hi there.
When I approached this opera, I knew right away that I wanted to incorporate North Carolina music into it. I wanted to be specific. I wanted to be local. I wanted, and as much as, look, I don't have a time machine and I can't go back to when Omar.
Somebody needs to mute themselves, please.
Just sit over here.
Okay, perfect.
Somebody's talking on the phone. You need to mute yourself. Let me just check the chat while I'm doing that. She does look like Alicia Keys. She's very complimented by that.
When I approached this opera, I knew right away that I wanted to incorporate North Carolina music into it.
It's
I wanted to
154.
be specific. I wanted to be local. I wanted, and as much as, look, I don't have a time machine and I can't go back to when Omar was brought up to Fayetteville and to know exactly what he heard. But I feel like I had the best chance of many to have a line into that because of my experience with.
Okay, let me just pause because there are a couple of people that are talking over the thing. Okay, I think I got everyone muted. Let me just try one more time. Share, back up just a tiny bit. Okay.
Show. This is from North Carolina. My mentor, Joe Thompson, was 86 when I met him. He was an African-American fiddler, one of the last of the old style, learned from his father. It's a long line that goes all the way back to the time of slavery, and this is a tune that I learned from him. And so that's why I put it in this. It's about as close as I can get to what Omar would have heard, in a way that's authentic to me. But it's, I can't do it without the banjo, but anyway. Oh, corn liquor was the cause of it all. Oh, corn liquor was the cause of it all. Oh, corn liquor was the cause of it all. Oh, corn liquor was the cause of it all. I got drunk, fell off the wagon. Oh, corn liquor was still on dragging. I got drunk, fell off the wagon. Oh, corn liquor was still on dragging. I got drunk. So what I did is I took one of Joe's tunes and I incorporated it into the opera. And there's a dance and there's this idea of enslaved communities being these three-dimensional things, They had music and they had dance and they had ways of having joy, ways of finding connection with each other that had nothing to do with their enslavers. And it's important to have that feel now because you're going to be dancing. Just to let you know.
So there are a few more excerpts like that that I'll send to you so you can hear in rehearsal a little bit more on stage. And then there's an aria she wrote for that character she made up named Julie, the kind of angel-like character. And we have a great recording of her singing accompanied by Bill Frisell, guitarist, mainly associated with bluegrass, white player who lives in Franklin, Tennessee, south of Nashville, Bill Frisell, and then also Francesco Teresi accompanying her. So this is the composer herself singing the song she wrote for the leading operatic mezzo-soprano, but singing it in her own lighter voice. So this is called Julie's opera aria. Okay, sorry.
My daddy wore a cap like yours.
Cap. P.
He got down on his knees and he faced the rising sun, and he did it again when the day was done. He wouldn't eat this and he wouldn't eat that, no matter the lean, no matter the fat. He drove my mama crazy, but she loved him anyway. They found each other in the darkness. The way they looked at the world wasn't the same, but the way that they looked at each other, there was the flame. They sold my daddy down when I was 10. I've never grown as fast as I did then. The last look in his eye was for me and her. I'll never forget the family we were. No matter what they say, our hearts beat red, just like theirs. No matter what they say, our tears get shed, just like theirs.
And I'll send you the link to that if you'd like to hear it. It's basically a two-part aria based on a ground bass. And one of the reasons that she wanted to do that is she wanted to reference Baroque opera. So I just wanted to play for you an example of Baroque opera. So you know what I mean by ground bass or that kind of thing. There is a composer in the late 1600s. That's really our only example of English language Baroque, middle Baroque opera, early opera that survives. And that's because of English history was very tumultuous, and there was a lot of banning of opera and banning of women from the stage and banning of singing in public and banning of costumes, and then they would allow it again, and the history of it is not as continuous. So there's a composer named Henry Purcell. Some British people say Purcell. He was a male alto, so he wrote high voiced parts for himself to sing, but during his lifetime, women were not allowed on the public stage, so very many of the female characters he sang himself. And he's living 1659 to 1695, sort of 60, 70 years into the creation of opera. And so he's known mainly to concertgoers for his opera called Dido and Aeneas, that does have a lot of Scottish witches in it as a Greek chorus, and some wild sailors that sound like they're from Liverpool. But it's basically a story of someone coming home from the Trojan War, and it ends with a long aria for the title character Dido, and Dido sings over an 8-measure pattern, a song called When I Am Laid in Earth. So I'll send you that too, but as an example of an old way of making arias, and a lot of the arias in Omar are on this style. Create an 8-measure pattern, that's typical of pop music now too, and then layer different kinds of melodies over the top of it. So this is an example I just want to show you right now from a different Purcell aria called King Arthur, and it was composed right after the Thames froze. They had a sort of little ice age during Henry Purcell's lifetime. He lived from 1659 to 1695. So in the late 1680s, the Thames froze a couple of times, and they had frost fairs, and so they had a lot of extra snow scenes and ice scenes. And so this is a scene that he wrote for himself to sing. Basically, he sings a rising chromatic scale, very, very simple, and then a descending chromatic scale, very, very simple, and you have the same chords repeating underneath it. This was the piece of music that inspired both that aria that you just heard, just kind of like Dido's Lament, but in major, has similar phrases, and it inspired the opening music for the television show The Crown, that has a composer who also wrote all the music for Downton Abbey. And so this piece, it inspired the beginning of The Crown, and it inspired Downton Abbey music, and it also inspired the construction of a lot of the arias in Omar. So I just wanted to let you hear a little bit of it. You can hear how repetitive and simple the background is, and that's a really important element of Baroque opera. Okay, will it play? Okay, it should be playing. And the character is called the Cold Genius, or just Snow. Just 2 chords per bar. It's kind of quiet. It's turned up. Now we're back home at C minor, and it repeats. Fourth time we're hearing the background tune. So I include that, even though that's music from 1690, just to show you that not only is she trying to use early written down recorded music from the New World, but she's trying to use music that's contemporaneous to that from Europe, at least in form. Okay, let me let you hear from the other composer who was involved with the production. He did the orchestrations, and he helped to write transitions between the main arias, and worked with her as she was figuring out how to overlap and overlay all of these different real materials into her new score. He helped her choose orchestral instruments.
At the time, because it was a...
Okay, let me go back just a little bit.
Where he was caught and thrown in jail.
Okay, why is it not working? Should be working. I wanted to show you the part where they show him writing, and the writing appears behind him.
What he did next astonished all who saw. So the story goes, he found a bit of charcoal and began writing verses from the Quran in Arabic on the walls of his cell. So these are Omar's own words in his own handwriting on these drapes.
Right. Omar opens this act.
Christopher Myers is the production designer for Omar, the opera.
This dramatic moment that he is writing is still the central moment of the entire piece.
Because of what?
Because it was illegal at the time, because it was a remarkable thing for a black man to be writing, to be speaking his culture, to kind of reveal the breadth and width of his humanity.
James Owen, a prominent planter and politician, a devout Christian, is intrigued. He buys Omar, gives him special treatment, introduces him to Christianity. Omar may or may not have converted, willingly or not. He was enslaved, and everything that's known about his life, the question of his conversion, even what's in his autobiography, has to be seen through that lens.
I felt like I was reading a document by someone who was watching his words.
What do you mean?
I didn't feel his heart. I felt like he was hiding himself.
But without these pages, without being able to stare into his eyes, there would be no opera attempting to fill in the blanks. Omar will travel next to Los Angeles and multiple other cities after that. Omar ibn Said was thought to be 93 when he died in 1864, after the Emancipation Proclamation, before the end of the Civil War. He was never freed. Why is Omar's story important to tell people?
Because of everything we've been talking about, recovering our history and telling the full history of the United States in a way that includes what a multicultural country we've always been.
I don't think I can say it better than Julie does in the opera, you know? Tell your story, Omar, you must, or they will never know, and we will fade into dust. That's it. We need to know their stories.
So what I want to do is to give you some homework, and in the homework, here's just a last thing of one of the things I'll send to you. Rhiannon Giddens received the Pulitzer Prize for this opera, and that is a musical prize. So she shared it with Michael Abels, who did the overture and the orchestration. It is not technically a prize about words. So when someone says they're a Pulitzer Prize winning librettist, it means they worked on a project where the music won the Pulitzer Prize. Émigré also, the year after this, was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. So this kind of project is becoming more recognized and rewarded. There is a longer presentation with all of the creators of this that has a few more live performing examples. That was done at the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco, so I'll send you that link if you want to explore this a little bit more. And I wanted to let you hear a project that Rhiannon Giddens did during COVID, which was a piece that she composed that's sort of like a little mini cantata, and she got friends from the Metropolitan Opera Chorus to sing and overlap their voices and be the chorus. So this is an example of her smaller concert works. I'll also send you a link. PBS did a whole presentation of a new ballet that she wrote called Mary and the Bard, having to do with one way that Black history and Shakespeare meet each other. So here's just a short example of her starting to write classical choral music outside the context of a whole staged story. This is called Cry No More, and it was made specifically to be recorded during COVID, and it was put up as a Zoom concert.
First they stole our bodies, I can't cry no more. Then they stole our sons, I can't cry no more. Then they stole our God, I can't cry no more. And gave us a new one, I can't cry no more. Then they stole our beauty, I can't cry no more. The comfort in our skins, I can't cry no more. Then they gave us duty, I can't cry no more. And then they gave us sin, I can't cry no more. And then came generations that helped to build this land. I can't cry no more. The bedrock of a nation was laid with these brown hands. The solace of a people was found with that new God. And many peaceful steeples would guard the road we trod. And then they stole our solace, and then they stole our peace, with countless acts of malice and hatred without cease. A foul and dirty river runs through this sacred land. With every act of terror, they tell us where we stand. 500 years of poison, 500 years of grief, 500 years of reason to weep with disbelief. The legacy is mighty. We can't carry this alone. You have to help us fight it, and together we'll be home. We can't cry no more. To mourn, it's not enough to weep. The power of your anger has to carry past next week. There's need at every level. There's so much work to do. There's a rising tide of justice, and it all begins with you. And it all begins with you.
Okay, so I have sent to all of you, let's see if I can get it to show what I should have just sent today. No, that's the opposite direction, sorry. Okay. An email that says class number 3. It had the Zoom link on the top, and then there's just two short links relating to Rhiannon Giddens, who I started talking about today, but I want to continue talking about next time. Her free video site at YouTube, which has 5 different albums of hers and some classical works, and then a short description of a ballet that PBS has just done. And if you're a member of PBS, you can log in and watch the entire thing rather than just seeing the clips of it. I'll play a few more clips of her music. Her current project, her most recent project, is getting really interested in Irish Gaelic. And that's one of the languages that I have some training in. I used to teach an Irish music class at Boston College a long time ago. So I put her in touch with some Irish people and gave her a little bit of an overview of singing in Irish. And she's been making recordings and doing duets in Gaelic with Irish musicians. So I think that may result in a future project where she writes music that is Irish fiddle tunes that survive in the United States, and maybe it'll have some Irish text to it. So watch those 2 things next time, and we'll talk a little bit about her music more. Then I will start next week and continue in the 5th class with the contemporary American composer. That's the one that was the DJ originally. And so I've got his website there if you'd like to start listening to his music farther in advance. 3 excerpts from a piece called Sirens that he wrote for 12-voice chorus for choir my husband and I used to sing in, although I don't think we're on this recording. A cantata that Mason Bates wrote, and some excerpts and information about his brand new opera that sold out at the Met. And that's the one that they did make a recording of that hopefully will be available. So that's a bit about Rhiannon Giddens today, and I want you to listen a bit. There is no full audio recording of Omar. There's no film that's been made of Omar. And let's see, question in the chat. Are the national languages of Senegal still spoken today? Yes, they are. And she was in Washington, D.C., and she went to a couple of the universities there. One of them's George Washington, and they have departments of African languages. Also, there is still today, until they get fired, but still today, and for about the last 10 years, a new, really wonderful librarian at the Librarian of Congress in the section that is African and African American collections. Who puts people in touch with language experts and scholars, and was able to show her the original documents in Arabic and a little bit Mandingo and a little bit English, and put her in touch with coaches. Then the only other thing we've listened to so far that's like that's kind of multilingual, is the very first scene of Émigré. Maybe I will just make a copy of a little PDF of the first big choral scene where the characters arrive in Shanghai with the page that has all the different languages the characters are singing. Because that's something we're definitely trying to move toward. Since we have all these wonderful subtitles possible, you can hear the sounds of the original languages characters would have sung, and see subtitles on the screen so you have full understanding. Yeah. Great. Okay, so then you have your homework already, which is listen to some things of your choice from the composer's website, Rhiannon Giddens, and listen to some excerpts of the ballet that she recently did called Black Lucy and the Bard. And then if you want to go on and listen to Mason Bates, that would be great. Any other questions to conclude that didn't get written in the chat that I can address right now? That's all I see so far. Yeah, so just feel free to write me an email as well, asking for links or specific things. So you'll be getting a couple of resource emails from me later today. Okay, thank you very much. Nice to see everyone. So we'll do a little bit more.
Thank you.
And she will be performing in Boston. She will be performing in Boston this winter. I'm not sure if I can find it quickly off the top of my head, but I will send you that date. It'll be at the Orpheum Theater, and I believe it'll be this April. The Orpheum Theater has a series called Global Arts Live, and they're going to feature her playing banjo and singing and talking and doing her whole own concert backed up by a band in April in Boston at the Orpheum. So I'll find that link and send that to you as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We'll see you next time. We'll be hearing Mason Bates' nice classical music with a little bit of thump, 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 thump underneath in an electric track. So, great. I'll see you all later. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay.